Many words were expended trying to articulate what it is like to be crazy, or just me. But then I went beyond the crazy. I wrote about looking pregnant in a billowy shirt, which I never wore again. I wrote about my mother's nose and how it was perfect and how come I didn't get that nose. I wrote about my love of The Who, my first kiss, my hamster Tinsel, may he rest in peace. And once I'd said everything there was to say about me, which took about 5 years, give or take, I started writing about politics, which I was really not qualified to do at all. I thought naively that I could write about Israel without alienating a wide swath of people. I'm Jewish, but I was banned from like every Jewish organization in the city. I wrote about my disgust with Pat Buchanan, which did not curry favor with the Jewish community, which is kind of why I wrote about it, but anyhow. And why I thought it was okay to vote for Barack Obama just because he was black. I wrote about all kinds of stuff I had no credentials to write about, and I had very permissive editors, as you might imagine. Also, I was one of the editors of the paper, so... Hey, what do you think about running me this week? I think we have room for that. And when I ran out of things to do, I did what everybody does when they run out of things to do, which is I started a blog. And I did YouTube videos. I really compounded the crime there. Interestingly, I never wrote about sex, believe it or not. I was extremely circumspect about the life of the body. Part of this was my embarrassment in front of my editor, who was raised Catholic and who I thought would be appalled by my loose morals. One time I did submit a column to him about sex, one time only, and it was a story of how I called this guy after 6 years. I hadn't seen him for 6 years, hadn't talked to him, nothing. I called him up. I said, hey, how are you? Do you want to have some casual sex, no strings attached? And he said, I was hoping that's why you were calling. It was perfect. I thought it was really funny, right? I submitted the column to him, to my editor, and he's like, Liz, I think it's just too personal after all that. So then I felt like a slut, and I was embarrassed. But I think I have issues anyway with sex. I know you're surprised I have issues. I feel like sex is just inherently humiliating. And, like, I would shoot myself if I knew there was a video of me having sex. I would not want to see that. For some reason, I didn't find mental illness embarrassing, because my feeling about it was, it's not my fault, you know? I mean, I have asthma also, but an inhaler is not a vibrator. It's not humiliating to have an illness. So I talked a lot about it. But I was very ashamed of desire, especially my brand of desire. Which, it's kind of, so I was attracted to girls from the start, but I never told anyone. And I don't know what I was thinking. It's not like I was growing up in the 50s, okay? But for some reason, I felt like I couldn't tell anybody in the 70s, oh my gosh. So I just played along. When my female friends, they were all obsessed with this boy's legs, and they would crowd the soccer field to look at his sexy legs. And they loved it when he wore the short shorts, and they would all call out, Andrew! And so I would sit with them, and I would call out too, and it's just like, I don't get it. I would rather watch field hockey. So this sense of alienation, I think, can best be explained by the Diet Coke commercial from several years ago with the guy who has a really weird name. He's a supermodel whose name is Lucky Vanus or something. And he's standing and he's drinking a Diet Coke, and there are women who are in an office, and they're looking out of the office window. I don't know if that rings a bell. And they're all like watching him drink the Coke, and his neck is sweaty, and the apple's apple is bobbing. And, you know, they're all fanning themselves as though there's a volcano between their thighs or something. And watching that commercial made me feel like I had no vagina. It was like, what the hell are they talking about? One other example, when I was in college, just to show you, when I was in college, a friend told me, if you don't know if you're attracted to a guy, picture him standing alone in an empty room with an erection. And and he's naked, I'm sorry. He's naked. So he's naked, he has an erection, empty room. And if after you have that image kind of in your mind, you still want to date him, then you're definitely attracted to him. Let me say that for me, that image is just ridiculous. I mean, there's no man. You could put any man in the world in that room, and I would just be like, whoa. So, all of that might lead you to think I'm gay. It probably should have led me to think that, too. Anyway, but I dated men almost exclusively for most of my life. And I did fall deeply in love with them. The kind of love that has you pacing the floors, waiting for the phone to ring, or sitting in the car and binging on moon pies with your headlights off, waiting to kind of catch a glimpse. Not personal. But I am a serial monogamist, a hetero serial monogamist. My passions and my intellect are fully engaged by men. And I even got married to a man who I had only had sex with a handful of times before we got married. And on my wedding night, I opened a present from a friend. It was this sexy lingerie, and I thought, oh gosh, I wish she had gotten flannel pajamas. It would have been more appropriate. I mean, but I was in love with my husband, my ex-husband, but not for, anyway, he's not here, it's okay. I was totally in love with him, though. He was beautiful and smart and stormy and all of that, so. And with women, I am kind of a bad person, which didn't seem like something that I could admit to readers, getting it back to that. Because with readers, you're supposed to get them to like you so that they'll continue to pick up your publication and read about you again and again. And I just didn't feel like I could confess that half of me, or maybe even more than half, is sort of like a frat boy standing with the red cup, you know, and thinking like, God, I wish she'd stop talking already so I can just get laid. So the worst came one night with a woman I knew, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, TMI, but I knew that she was like too drunk to really know what we were about to do, but I didn't stop. I actually got to the point where her shirt was off, and then she looked up at me with this total confusion. She had no idea who I was. I saw it in her eyes, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? You know, and I stepped back, but I did get her top off. I mean, so I'm a bad person, okay. And that was an ugly story that I didn't feel I could share with readers. I didn't think that they would respect me. Now, I understand that my proclivities in the age of savage love and the like are pretty pedestrian, actually. And all of us find pieces of ourselves in the conscience-stricken frat boy, or the lusty secretary, or the girl in the car with the headlights low. We sometimes like to fuck, we sometimes like to make love, and we hope that we feel these feelings in relatively straightforward ways. And the fact that I was complicated on this subject just didn't seem palatable. I already had enough angles. Unfortunately, now I have to write not a column about these angles, but a book. And it's all my own fault. I've trapped myself. At the peak of my frenetic self-disclosure, I was profiled in the New York Times, in the style section, which I can assure you is not where anyone expected me to appear. When I was in high school, I used to wear a yellow button-down shirt with a blue shoelace as a tie, because I thought I was being mod. Okay. Not a stylish person. So the writer of the profile told me, this is going to change your life, and it did. I mean, there were publishers, agents, literary people crawling out of everywhere. I went over my minutes, they were sending me emails, and they all said the exact same thing, which was, so I know you're probably already writing a book. And I had to say, actually, no, I'm not. Because I felt like I had been writing a book. I had written more than 500 columns about myself, and it was sort of like, what more is there to say? So I suggested that I write this journalistic kind of, this book about the mental health system and the changes in the system, the transformation from a medical model to a recovery-oriented model, anyway, blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was a really great idea, and everybody told me, like, that was absolutely unacceptable. They told me, memoir is the thing, And the appeal of me, nobody was calling me because they were interested in my journalism. They were all calling me because they were interested in the me who was the first person me. So the Liz Spikol who wasn't afraid of the bra strap creeping down the arm in public. The Liz Spikol who didn't mind the tags still on the clothing. The one who'd happily tell people she once had a cancerous tumor that turned out to be a hemorrhoid. Kind of, you know, Jonathan Ames without the drinking, that kind of thing. So I went to New York. I did the agent hunt thing, which is the only kind of hunting I do, incidentally. And I narrowed it down to 2 agents, and one of them was the agent of somebody really, really, really about to be famous, Barack Obama. At the time, it was kind of up in the air, you know, which way he was going to go. But I didn't go with her. I went with a different agent who's a wonderful person, incredible teeth, like just the most amazing smile. Her husband's a poet. They went to Wesleyan. I went to Oberlin. It just felt like, oh yeah, I get you. So, and she's patient, and that is really her greatest virtue. Because for a year, I sent her chapters of a book about mental illness, a memoir of mental illness. A year, and she read them, and she wrote back, and she used to be an editor, and so she loved the process. Okay, she really had to love it, because after a year, we went out to lunch, and I said, I hate this book, I can't write this book. I don't want to be me. So she said, but you have to be Liz Spikol, that's like our whole relationship. So I said, okay, but I want to be a different Liz Spikol. Can I be a bisexual Liz Spikol, and maybe write about that? And so I pitched her this bisexual book. And so in my typically reticent way, I did that by telling her about the first time I masturbated, which was relevant. I wrote to her about being a bisexual activist at college, which meant having a really bad radio show. I told her that I worked with ACT UP, like that was my street cred. I told her about working at a gay bookstore and how I only got 1 date out of it. My whole purpose was getting dates. I got 1 date, and she took me to Bennigan's and told me about her most recent psych hospitalization. I was like, I don't like Bennigan's. I told her about my ex-girlfriend and our incompetent attempt to have a relationship while I was living with my boyfriend. I told her about my friends trying to dress me up like a lesbian and how I put all the clothing on wrong because I don't know how to be butch. And she loved it. She loved it so much that we had to run back to her office, and she made me tell the masturbation story to her colleague in the lobby. It was more awkward there. And she got me so fired up about it that I thought, I'm just going to bang this shit out in a week. However, something is wrong. My first person mojo is stopped up. It's not the subject of the mental illness memoir, apparently. It's just the me of it. I find that I'm paralyzed now by this whole body world style revelation thing that I should be doing. And it seems to be seeping over into every aspect of my life. So if I see a friend on my caller ID, I think, what are we going to talk about? I don't have anything. You know, I just feel like I'm blocked. I feel empty, like the bottle of phenobarbital that I have at home that I try and suck droplets out of, even though it's been empty for like 2 years, because it made me feel like a god when I was taking it. But this should be a dynamic time for me, because I stopped writing my column, I'm phasing out my blog. So now that I don't have to be Liz Spikol, I can be anyone I want to be. But who the hell is that? I don't know who that is. And I'm now thinking that it might not be a person who can write a bisexual memoir or a mental illness memoir. I'm thinking that maybe it's a person who's not self-revelatory at all. Well, this event is giving me pause, but maybe the new Liz Spikol, I'm thinking, is just a person who loves her mentally delayed chihuahua and reads Moby Dick on her iPhone. Is that enough? It doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like a book, though with the state of the memoir, you never know. Either way, I need my mojo back.